Amen. Now, our study this morning is a continuation from our last review that we had. So my last review was our last study together. We looked at how the king of the north and the king of the south took us to equality. As we draw the line of our reform line, we have the increase of knowledge as the king of the north, the king of the south, the world wars, and the formalization message as equality. And the question that was raised up, which was my review, was how does those world wars took us to equality? And we started off with looking specifically at the beginning of the king of the south, Egypt, that was under the ruling of Ptolemy. We looked at France. We looked at Stalin and the USSR. Then we looked at the relationship, or we went to the geographical model of the North and the South. And we saw that they are polar opposites. And even though they are polar opposites, they are also a mirror image by using Daniel 11, church and state relationship. So king of the south and king of the north are mirror image in the church-state relationship. And it was through that we were able to understand equality, that it is cause and effect. Before we move on to that, I would like us to review the development of that message. As I've already mentioned, as we looked at the lines and the dispensation of the latter rain, we could see that the world wars brought us to equality. So we need something. To get to the world wars, we need something to bring us to the world wars. And that catalyst was X27. So we have X27. We have X27. X27 shows us the line of a ship, and a portion of these lines was the dispensation of Penium to Sunday law. Penium to Sunday law. And in this dispensation, we have the history of 273. We know that from Penium to Sunday law is the harvest of the Levites. And we can see that 273 has the connection to the harvest period. Then we go to Numbers 3. Right? We go to Numbers 3. Numbers 3. So in Numbers 3, we see the link. The 273 here links to the Levites between X27 and Numbers 3. So 273 symbolizing the Levites. 273 symbolizing the Levites. And between X27 and 273, we have two witnesses. So these are the two witnesses. This is the review that we had in our first study on this topic. Okay? And that 273 relates to the harvests of the Levites. Now, this is the catalyst that took us to 273 BC. Okay? We have two witnesses that shows us that 273 relates to the Levites. And then these two witnesses, brought us to the Pyrrhic War. Okay? We have the Pyrrhic War. It was the war of the king of the north and the king of the south in 273 BC. And 273 is the waymark of a whole history by itself. So this two-way mark on both sides, we have Panem here, and we have Sunday law. Okay? We have Panem here, and we have Sunday law, and this two-way mark relates to the Battle of Beneventum and Argos. Okay? So 273, as I've already mentioned, is a whole history, and it is this year. We have 273 BC. And it is this history, 273 BC, is the establishment of ancient Rome. And it is this war that Rome becomes a global power. Okay? Now, this gives us another witness, the Fourth Diadochi War. Okay? This is the two witness. Okay? This is the Fourth Diadochi War, and this is a witness that gives us World War II. We have World War II. Now, when we overlay the Fourth Diadochi War and with World War II, we can bring that to our line and make application. So we have two witnesses that taught us World War II. And World War II taught us World War III. So we have World War III. We have two witnesses. Sorry. We have World War III, and then overlay it with the Fourth Diadochi War, sorry, World War II, overlay it with the Fourth Diadochi Wars. And using these two witnesses, this Pyrrhic War, the Fourth Diadochi War, and World War II. Let me change this again. We have Fourth Diadochi War, and we have World War II, and this is the two witness that brought us down to World War II. And by using this, we make application in our line. Now, the diadochi one, we have the Third Diadochi War and World War I. This is World War I, giving us more information on World War III. Now, they have their own stories. World War I and the Third Diadochi War explained more. Understand. So we have two witnesses to give us the Fourth Diadochi War. We have, the World War II. We have another two witnesses here, Fourth Diadochi War and World War II, giving us information on World War III, and another two witnesses here, to explain more of our reform line. So we all understand about the principle of two or more witnesses, I think, is established. So in World War III, we have multiple witnesses for us to be strongly establish this line of the World War III. The triple application for the war wars builds a relationship, between the Soviet Union and the United States. From 1989, this is from 1989, which is our time of the end, 1989, all the way to Panium. All the way to Panium. And not only does it end here, we can see that after World War II, there is a Cold War. There is a Cold War. Cold War. And so is after the Fourth Diadochi War. So is the Diadochi War. There is a Cold War. Here, after Panium, there is a defeat of the King of the South and a deadly wound and a death at the Sunday Law. So in here, we will also expect a Cold War, which is a death, a deadly wound, and a death.
Can you drop your video? Thank you.
Now, our study this morning we'll be focusing on the Third Diadochi War. So the Third Diadochi War speaks about the papacy. The story of the King of the North and the King of the South is the theme of World War III. The Third Diadochi War talks about the relationship between the United States and papacy, which they also add more information on this line of the World War III. And this relationship between the United States and papacy begins all the way from 1989. It talks about the King of the North, which is Antigonus, and Antigonus who is going to be the king of the north, having an enemy with Eumenes, and Antigonus with his two allies, Seleucus and Pathan. And Seleucus also symbolizes a king of the north. Okay? So I'll wrap this off. Just to summarize this before I wrap it off, and we will focus on the Third Diadochi War. So Acts 27 is the catalyst of the world wars. So it is the story of the sheep, and a portion of that story we have Penium and Sunday Law, which we have 273. Okay? And as we go to Numbers 3, we have 273 symbolized as the Levites. And these two witnesses brings us to 237 BC, the Pyrrhic War. And in this Pyrrhic War, we have Beneventum and Argus, which is from Penium to Sunday Law. And we also understand that 273 symbolizes the Levites. Also, it symbolizes that this is during the time, the harvest time period of the Levites. Now, as we look down at the Fourth Diadochi War, we have these two witnesses to give us World War III. World War II. Overlaying them, giving us World War II. Using this, we can use its application on World War III. Not only that, we have the Third Diadochi War and World War I. These are two witnesses, and they add stories to our reform line, which is the World War III from 1989 all the way to Penium. Okay? Not only Penium, we have Sunday Law. You could see that we have a Cold War in World War II and a Cold War at the Fourth Diadochi War. So we'll be focusing on the Third Diadochi War today. And the Third Diadochi War has shown us the information, the relationship between the United States and papacy. So we have the Third Diadochi War, and as we review the histories, we'll be looking at its application too. Now, 1989. 1989 is not the beginning of World War III, but it is the end of World War II. It is the end of World War II. And the Third Diadochi War, Battle of Gabin. The Battle of Gabin is part of the Second Diadochi War. Okay? So in here, at the Third Diadochi War, we have the Battle of Gabin. Okay, let me use another color red on the history. So we have the Battle of Gabin. Now, the Battle of Gabin is not the beginning of the Third Diadochi War. It is the end of the Second Diadochi War. 1989. 1989 is not the beginning of World War III, but it is the end of World War II, which is the Cold War. And that is from 1945 to 1989. And that is the end of the Cold War. Now, Battle of Gabin. This is the story of Antigonus. So we have Antigonus. Excuse me. Sorry about that. My mom is trying to join into the Zoom and couldn't connect, so that's it. Okay. Now, Battle of Gabin is about Antigonus. Antigonus is the king of the north. And Antigonus defeated the king of the south, which is Eumenes. Now, Antigonus has two allies. Two allies. One is Seleucus, and the other one is Pathon. Now, Seleucus symbolizes papacy, which is also king of the north. And Pathon symbolizes Islam. In application, before we go to the application, I would like to add that the Third Diadochi War is a line of success. It's a line of success. And it is the Omega history. Omega history. So as I've mentioned, the Battle of Gabin is the defeat of the king of the south, which is Eumenes, from the inside. So from within, by Antigonus, king of the north, with the help of Antigonus' two allies, Seleucus and Pathon. Seleucus, papacy. Pathon is Islam, which is the Mujahideen. Now, the relationship between Antigonus and these two allies starts to fall apart after Antigonus wins from Eumenes and takes the title of Master of the East or Master of Asia. Now, that title, Antigonus took it to himself. Since they were allies with these two, defeating Eumenes with the help of Seleucus and Pathon, Antigonus got the title of Master of the East or Master of Asia to himself and did not include Seleucus and Pathon. Now, he took that title because he now controls the Eastern satellite state. And then through this history, Pathan begins to grow in power. Begins to grow in power. So when Antigonus realizes that Pathan was growing in power, he felt threatened. So as Antigonus becomes more powerful, seeing his allies, he feels threatened. So what he does, he kills Pathan. He kills Pathan. And when Seleucus saw this, Seleucus flee. When Antigonus kills Pathan. Now in the application, in 1989, we understand that there has been an ongoing the 10-year period, the 10-year term from 1979. So from 1979 to 1989, we have a 10-year war, which is the Afghanistan war. And 1989, as the United States, the King of the North, uses Mujahideen to help take down the Soviet Union. So we understand here, the United States had two allies. One was Pope John Paul II. And another one was the Mujahideen, which is Islam. Now, Mujahideen, they changed their name to Taliban. So as they increases in power in 1996, so in our reform line, we have 1989, we have 1991, and we have 1996. Okay? So as they increased in power in 1996, the Mujahideen took control of the Afghanistan government in here. Afghanistan government. And in here, they changed their name to Taliban. Yeah. They changed their name to Taliban. Now, the United States saw this as a threat as the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. So in 2001, we understand that in 2001, one of another major waymark the United States goes to Afghanistan to throw off the Taliban government. Yeah? Now Antigonus kills Pathan, and Seleucus flees, and he no longer has loyalty to Antigonus, or there is no allies between Antigonus and Seleucus. As we move on down to history all the way to 2019. 2019. This is the story of Gaza, the Battle of Gaza. Yeah? Now, this battle is called Rafia, but it's not the Rafia of Daniel 11. The Rafia that we always put it at 2019. But it connects with this Rafia. So Battle of Gaza, to repeat that again, Battle of Gaza is also known as Battle of Rafia, but it's not the Battle of Rafia in Daniel 11. But they have a connection. Connection. So the Battle of Rafia, which is Gaza, this is the battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. In here, the king of the north is Antigonus. And the king of the north is defeated by the king of the south, which is Ptolemy. So king of the north is defeated by the king of the south, and the king of the south is Ptolemy. Ptolemy. Let me put it up here. King of the north, Antigonus. King of the south, Ptolemy. Now, when Seleucus sing all this, he then goes back to Babylon and try to control Babylon. Now, we have Rafia and we have Panium. We have Panium. Here at Panium, Antigonus comes back and defeats Ptolemy. So the king of the south is defeated by the king of the north. And it is here that Antigonus defeated Ptolemy. Now, from Panium to Sunday Law. Once Antigonus defeats Ptolemy, he leaves the king of the south alone and went to make war with Seleucus. Now, from this time period of Panium to Sunday Law, this is the Babylonian War. This is the Babylonian War. And this is between the United States and the papacy in application. And at the end of this period, it is a victory for Seleucus. Now, we have Seleucus here, also can be called the king of the north, symbolizing it as papacy. Now, at the end of this war, we have the Seleucid dynasty. Seleucus dynasty. Now, Antigonus still have his empire. In this Babylonian war, let me go back. In this Babylonian war, Seleucus won. And after that war, which is victory for Seleucus, we had the Seleucid dynasty. Antigonus still have his empire, but Seleucus is able to carve out his own. And as I've already mentioned, that is the beginning of the Seleucid dynasty. So the Third Diadochi War plays a role in World War III. And to explain that, we can see that in 1989, there was this secret alliance between the Pope and Reagan versus the USSR, which is the Soviet Union. With the help of these two allies, the papacy and Islam, USA used those two allies to bring down the Soviet Union from 1989. And because of the behavior of the United States, these allies, between them, disintegrates. And in order for papacy or Pope John Paul to achieve that political power, the papacy has to fight for it. USA doesn't just hand over power or authority to the papacy. So this war is not represented as friendship. These allies, it is a war. Now, the catalyst for this Battle of Raphia, as we go back after after Antigonus kills Python, Seleucus thinks that he could go back to Babylon, and he sees that the king of the north is weakened. Then here he realizes that he has an opportunity to make his own place. And he begins this fight for during the Babylonian War. His history doesn't mark the beginning of this Seleucid dynasty, but all there is to know is that the dynasty began just after the Babylonian War, and we mark that as the Sunday Law. Usually we always mark the resurrection of the papacy at the Sunday Law. But as we have been reviewing our studies through the counterfeit, we have been enlightened that in order for that to be fully resurrected at the Sunday Law, there is a process, steps that leads up to that resurrection. And that process began in 2001. So after the Seleucid dynasty, Seleucus goes east and builds his empire. So his empire builds and rapidly grows in power, conquering the east. Seleucus came back to fight with Antigonus he comes back at the Battle of Ipsus. Okay? And we have that battle in the Fourth Diadochi War. Okay? So after Seleucid dynasty, Seleucus goes east and starts building his empire. His empire rapidly grows into power, conquering the east. He comes back to kill Antigonus at the Battle of Ipsus. Now, we've always known that in the church, we don't always go to work internally before the Sunday law. Yeah? And we know a whole history before the Sunday law. If we draw our line of the priests, if you draw the line of the 144,000, there is a process in order for us to have that, to go and work after Sunday law. And that is what the counterfeit does the same. As we know that Satan always counterfeits God's work. And as we draw the line of the counterfeit, not the whole line, we will look at five 538. Okay? So from 538 to 1798. 1798, this is the 1260. And it is at 1798 where the papacy receives its deadly wound and a death in 1799. So here there's a death in 1799. And it falls from 1798 to 1799. From 1789 to 1789. And we've been learning that from our previous study, that this is the French Revolution from 1789 to 1799. And that is the 10-year war. Now, during this 1260, the deadly wound and a death. Okay? So in here, the papacy loses something, okay, during that 1260. Okay? During that 1260, the papacy loses something, and then losing that that something, which we'll go on to it later, results in the death. Okay? We look at from 1899 to 1845. Okay? 1899 to 1845, this is the 46 years, okay, where the papacy makes attempt to be resurrection. Back in our counterfeit studies, we have been clarifying that. And then they attempted it again in 1950. So there's been series of attempts that papacy has been trying to resurrect. It started from 1899 to 1845. These 46 years. It attempted again in 1950 and again in 1989. So it loses something and it's trying to get it back. So back in this 1260, the papacy had power over the kings. It was a what? It was a church and state relationship. Church and state relationship. Papacy having power over the king. And it's as I've already mentioned it, a church over power relationship, power over the people's life. And it's doing that through the state. Now, back in this history, in 1899 to 1845, these 46 years, they saw Hitler and thought that they could be the state and papacy, they could be resurrected as in this state during the 1260, but they were not able to do that. Now, what did Hitler did? What he did was he took what he needed from papacy. And what is that? He wanted to abolish the Democratic Catholic Party in Germany. He wanted to abolish them so that he could take control of the government. So he had this relationship with the papacy. Now, once his mission is accomplished, once Hitler's mission is accomplished, which is taking control of the government, he then ignores the papacy. And that is where the failure comes in at, sorry, I think it's supposed to be 1945. 1895 to 1945. Sorry for that error. Okay. Hitler took after Hitler accomplished his mission, ignores the papacy. Papacy couldn't control Germany, and as we looked at the count of the counterfeit, the line of counterfeit, we saw that this is where they failed their mission, or it was a disappointment. They couldn't get that political power that they had in 1260. So in here in this 1260, they had this political power, which is the state of church and state. They tried it in 1890, it is 46 years, they couldn't succeed. It was a disappointment. And there was serious attempt along the way. As we see it in application, in 1989, they see the United States. We have the United States. So they're going into alliance with Reagan. Now, Reagan wants something that they want the Pope to help them take down. And what is that? That is the Soviet Union. So Reagan acts like a friend to the Pope. Now, once the Soviet Union receives its deadly wound, and we understand that from 1989, it receives its deadly wound and a death in 1991. Once Once the United States or Reagan has its mission accomplished, which is the taking down of the Soviet Unions, and the Soviet Union receiving this deadly wound, Reagan ignores the Pope. Yeah? So this dying, yeah, which is the deadly wound, it means the losing of something. So it should be, in order for it to gain it to be in that 1 to 60 state, or to be resurrected, it has to have that power that it have during the 1 to 60. Eh? During that 1 to 60. Now, when we go back to Penium and Sandilon, the waymark from Penium to Sandilon, which is the Babylonian War. And after that war is won, it is the beginning of the Seleucid dynasty. Now, remember that Seleucus here in the Third Diadochi War, in application, it symbolizes the papacy. And it's here at the Seleucid dynasty, even at the Babylonian War, the papacy, Seleucid, won the war. And at the Seleucid dynasty, it's here that Seleucus has his power. Eh? So the power that was lost from 1798, from here, it was lost here, will be gained at the Sunday law. So the resurrection is when it has its power back. Now we know that that's the simple. The complexity is that the process that we've been learning from our counterfeit, that it all began all the way from 2001. So as we compare, the resurrection of the papacy to the King of the South, and its resurrection, we need to look back at how it began from 1989 and the death in 1991. We see that it has been fighting this war with America, known as the Cold War, and we could see that from World War II and the Fourth Diadochi War, that the period of the Cold War. Okay? What did it have? What did it have here in this period? In this period, okay, where it has the USSR. When it comes to this deadly wound, and dies, this is the losing of the spheres of influence. So the deadly wound here, here in 1989, it starts to lose them. In particular, we have Germany, the Eastern Germany, they have Poland. Yeah? So we have Eastern Germany, Poland, we have Ukraine, um, the Eastern Europe, South America, we have the Middle East. So it was global. It has a sphere of influence in the history of the Soviet Union. And it's at the deadly wound when it starts losing them. And by the time it is dead, it has lost its global power. It might have some influence, but it is not strong enough. The King of the South, it is not strong enough to defend its spheres of influence. So, for example, they can still have allies with Iraq, and it's this relationship with Saddam Hussein all the way from 1979 to 2003. But they could no longer defend him. So we need to look at what the Soviet Union lost. As we look at what papacy lost in this period from 1798 to have its death in 1799. Here at the King of the South, it was this global power that was demonstrated through the spheres of influence. And then after a few years later, Putin comes into the scene, or comes into action, was very active. So in 2003 with Iraq, by 2007 with the United States, and then it heightens at 2011. So we have 2003, we have 2007, and then 2011. Now in 2011, this is with Gaddafi. One is one of his allies here. In 2011, Gaddafi was killed in Yemen. In Yemen. One of his close allies, Putin's close allies, was killed in Yemen, which is Gaddafi. And this is what Putin said. He is not, never again. The word he used was never again, meaning he's going to now protect his allies. You can see that in 2019, this is when it returns to its superpower. When it returns to its superpower, the king of the South, and that was a process that began from 2003, 2007, the killing of Gaddafi in 2011, and what is happening in 2019 is bringing back or regaining his superpower, which is the spheres of influence. The spheres of influence. Like Syria, we have Ukraine, Venezuela, Yemen, Afghanistan, Turkey, and him trying to protect his spheres of influence, gaining all his spheres of influence. Okay. Now, go back to the papacy. We understand that in order to have full resurrection at the Sunday law, or to gain its power that was lost, or be able to go back to the state that it was in this 1260, it was a process that began in 2001. As the papacy, we understand it is a line of success, and it is the counterfeiting message of the true. We understand that at the Sunday Law Waymark, which is the name that we got from Ellen G. White, we understand that this is where the greatest test is on gender equality. Okay. So from the third Diadochi War, we were able to get to know or understand the relationship that the King of the North or the United States have with papacy. United States as Antigonus, papacy as Seleucid, Seleucus. And from Panion to Sunday Law, we will have a Babylonian War, and then after that Babylonian War, Seleucus will win that war, and the beginning of the Seleucid dynasty. Now, this past few months, we've been enlightened on through the media on what was happening. The synod that the Pope was doing. So I would like to share screen. And as I share screen, this is the Guardian. Could everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Now we understand that at this Waymark, at the Sunday Law, it has to deal with gender. And this Pope Francis has been doing this 3 synod beginning from 2021. So there was one in 2021, 2022, and the last one was in October this year in 2023. So the Guardian, we have an article that says that the Vatican gives conditional approval to blessings for same-sex marriage. And in this article, I'm trying to look at another article that I am so in this article, as we understand that the papacy is the counterfeit of the truth, and the counterfeit will be a 99% to the truth. As we are at closer to the Sunday law, the agitation of the Sunday law involving gender equality, here in this article, it talks about how Pope Francis gives condition approval to the blessing for same-sex marriage. And I'm just trying to look at a paragraph that talks about how Pope how Pope Francis agrees with blessing same-sex marriage, but does not see, and I paraphrase it as them being approved like a marriage ceremony. You know, like the Pope trying to say that he accepts or approves LGBTQI, but in practice, for them to be recognized as in marriage, that is where there is a condition to it, through that marriage doctrine that the Pope has just. This was in October. So just to summarize our study this morning, we looked at the world wars. Specifically, our study was on the Third Diadochi War, and the Third Diadochi War talks about the relationship of the United States and papacy, both the King of the North, and Rome began becomes global power back in 273 BC in the Pyrrhic War. We saw that in this Battle of Gabin, how from Panium to Sandilo, Seleucus, who is symbolized as papacy, will win the battle and expand his empire at the Seleucid dynasty. And we've been learning from our counterfeit messages, from the counterfeit review, that they are at the line of success. So they have a work that they are preparing for here at the Sunday Law, and it is here at the Sunday Law Waymark that they will gain that power that they have, or be fully resurrected as of the state that they had back in 1260. And we've seen how how Pope Francis has been as we looked at external events, taking out bishops or cardinals that doesn't suit his agenda and putting in those that suits him, and saying one thing and not saying one thing, but when it comes to practice, he's totally against it. Yeah? And as we look back in history, this 1260, the papacy had political power, political power, and that is something that they have lost, and they are as they go towards the Sunday mark to gain what they have lost in that 1260. Now that ends our study this morning. We will have a prayer before we take in questions and comments. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Dear God in heaven, we thank you for this Sabbath day. We thank you for this platform that we are able to join in from all parts of Oceania and review and discuss about this present truth message. We thank you for this present truth message, for the lines, for the world wars, that we are able to navigate ourselves through prophecies being fulfilled right now. We thank you for the lives of all the members that are tuning in, for the elders. Help us as we see things and focus on what is happening externally, prophetically, also in our internal lives, morally, as they always go hand in hand. Thank you once again, Lord, for this Sabbath day. Thank you for listening to our prayers. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.